In this video, we will learn how we can create graphs of a single variable. For this, we can again use the qplot function. When we created a scatter plot, we used the x and y parameters of qplot. However, if we want to graph just a single variable, we can only pass our variable as an argument to one of those axes. Here we have passed just the height variable to the x parameter. This has created a kind of graph known as a histogram. If you look at this graph, you can see that sure enough, the height variable has been plotted on the x-axis. However, we also have numbers on the y-axis. What do these numbers represent? We refer to the bars in a histogram as bins. They are so called because they collect up all the observations in the bin's range along the x-axis. The y-axis then shows how many observations are in each bin. To illustrate this point, I've drawn a circle to represent each Star Wars character that has been collected into each bin. The tallest bin collects all characters between about 175 to 185 centimeters. Since this is around the average height of a human, it's perhaps not too surprising that this is the height range with the most characters. A histogram can vary quite significantly depending on how many bins we divide our x-axis into. These four histograms show the exact same data, but look very different. For example, the top left histogram has just 2 bins, and you can see that almost all the data falls into the first bin, and almost none into the second bin. Okay, contrast that with the bottom right graph, where we have a lot of bins. In fact, many of those bins have a height of 0, meaning that no observations had a value in that range. This graph is hard to interpret because there's quite big jumps in height between the different bins, which creates a very jagged pattern. In general, we want to set the number of bins to avoid this kind of jaggedness. What we want is something like one of the other 2 histograms, either in the top right or the bottom left, where we have a relatively smooth distribution without too much jaggedness, but we also have enough bins that we show the overall pattern of the data. By default, the qplot function creates 30 bins, but you can change this number, and in practice, you often should. You might notice that so far we've only been looking at numerical variables, that is, columns of data that contain numbers. But we can also visualize categorical variables with qplot. If we have a single categorical variable that we want to graph, then we can also supply that to qplot. However, instead of a histogram, we will get a regular bar graph. The height of each bar shows us how many observations are in each of the categories. In this example, we are plotting the sex of all the characters in the Star Wars dataset. We can see that males are heavily represented compared to other categories.